Again, a brief introduction of myself. I've been a web developer for about almost 5 years now. These are some of the companies that I've worked for. Currently working for True Hearing right there, which is the green one there. Essentially, they're like 1-800-CONTACTS, but for hearing aids. So it's pretty awesome. I get to help people hear again. So let's get to this. We're trying to stay up to date on React. We want to make sure that we know what is happening in the React ecosystem. Well, we have a new hook that has been proposed earlier this year, and they're making headway on, called useEvent. So what problem is it trying to solve? I'm sorry to disappoint any of you, but it has nothing to do with events. It instead deals with functions. Their definition is, it is a hook to define an event handler with an always stable function identity. Well, what does that mean? Essentially, it's a hook that takes in a function similar to useCallback and will memoize it. But what's different from useCallback or useMemo is that it will keep the same function reference, keep all the values inside that function up to date, and do that all without a dependency array. So even if you re-render, the function reference stays the same. So let's see some examples here in action. Let's say we've got a shopping basket of some kind. You've got, a state up there that deals with the total. You have some component logic there. You define a function called onByClick. And it shows the total with the total from the state up there. And you pass that down to the buy button. Well, anytime that this basket re-renders, that buy button is also going to re-render. Why? Because you are redefining that function. Even though it looks the same, it looks like a const, anytime you re-render, you're creating a brand new function. The buy button receives a new prop, re-render. Thus, if the buy button has any kind of higher logic or any computation it has to do, you're going to have a performance hit. Well, here is the current way to fix that problem. The current way to fix that problem is to utilize the useCallback hook. You pass it in, you pass in your function. You have your dependency array which says, hey, this function depends on this thing. Make sure to recreate it if that thing ever changes. But what if your total is changing on every single keystroke? You're not actually getting any performance gain because you're constantly recreating that function. Thus, even though you're doing all the best practices, you're not getting any performance gain. Well, this is where useEvent comes in. Now, if I say useEffect, I am sorry. That is one of the biggest criticisms of this hook is its name. Not only do I not think it's descriptive, but it also overlaps too much with an already very ubiquitously used hook. But with useEvent, you pass in your function that you're wanting to save its reference for, and the total will update in real time. Even though this function is being passed in and it's updating that total, the reference will stay the same. Thus, the onByClick, that function that the buy button is receiving, it will look like the same function to it. It'll look like the same reference. It won't force a re-render. Thus, useMemo will actually give you the performance benefit you want. So let's look at another example. This example is a bit contrived, I know. But let's say we have a useEffect. And we are fetching some data. And we only really want to do this once. But whatever comes back from this useEffect, we want to run some kind of something on the data that has to do with some props that this component is receiving. Well, if this prop ever changes, we refetch the data, which makes a problem. it makes it so our component is less performant. Oh, sorry. But we could use event to strip out those things. We could take those extra bits of functionality that were dependent on our theme, and we could rip them out and put them inside of the useEvent. And thus, as our theme changes, our function will stay stable. And thus, our useEffect could have an empty dependency array and thus trigger only once, just like we want it to. So it has a lot of really neat benefits in that regard. So benefits. Because there's no need for a dependency array in useEvent, it prevents you having to recreate that function even though the internals may change. And the internal portions automatically are kept up to date. Thus, you can memoize things easily and useEffects can be made more performant. However, there are some drawbacks. It wouldn't be a new hook without some drawbacks. Here's some of the drawbacks. First, you cannot call an event inside of the render. It will simply throw an error. So if you want to have something similar, you have to still use callback. So that first useEvent right there, the render list item A, that's going to throw an error. Underneath there, list item B, still will work. I want to make sure I'm not blazing through my time here. 8 minutes, okay. So here is another drawback. Don't use this for everything. The idea is that because the idea with useEvent is that it is stable, it does not recreate itself each time that it is ran, or the internals change, you need to make sure that you're using it with that in mind. With this, let's say we had a form where we wanted to update the members based on text inside of a search box. This code would break. We're thinking, okay, we can strip everything out of our useEffect and we can put it inside of a useEvent. No. Reason why is that though the function of update members is going to get the updated search parameters, it will only trigger the one time because the dependency array for that useEffect at the bottom is empty. In other words, make sure that if you're putting something inside of a useEvent, that you're just wanting essentially a function that its internals can change, but you still need to know when you're calling it and how. And thus your useEffects need to be set up properly so that they're triggering when you want them to trigger. All right, so now I've explained all that. The question is, when can you use this? Well, we don't know. It was announced earlier this year, but they are still working on it. I've been keeping tabs on this particular hook, and even though it was declared or announced earlier, I think it was around March or May. It was one of those two. I haven't really seen too much traction on it recently, even though I do see in the background that the React team is still working on it. But if you want to keep track on it, if you go to github.com/reactjs and go to this pull request here, you'll be able to keep track of it yourself. It is planned on being released as a minor update, so as long as you keep your major React versions up to date, this will just come along for the ride when they finally finish. So, thank you very much for your time and attention today. If you have any questions, be happy to hear it. And here are some of the references that I put together to be able to put together this presentation. And in case you want to have access to the information, that QR code will lead you directly to this presentation. So, Thank you very much.